this is our instructional program overview. We talked about current and expected staffing. We'll review some of the known retirements and resignations that the board has approved, and get into some class size scenarios.
Okay, so what are we doing here? Summer break, I think. Okay, so let's start off with some goals for 1920. Academic excellence. So we're looking to maintain existing programs and services for all students K-12. We are always looking, all year long really, in conversations with our teachers, with some students depending on the level, with the consultants that come in to work with us, are exploring continuing to enhance learning opportunities that we provide for kids, both during the school day and after the school day. And I think the past couple of years we've actually made a nice dent in the after the school day piece for us. Developing,
Just presenting in a larger format.
Developing the K-5 social and emotional learning program and a 6-12 executive functioning model that will address behavioral components to the response to intervention. So those of us who work with that pyramid, if you will, there's one side of the pyramid where we focus on academic needs, kids who may be struggling with reading or math or content at 6-12, but certainly there's another piece that is behavioral. So we have probably the past couple of years worked on SEL at the 6-12 level. It's time to get down to elementary. This year, and Lisa and I, and how many people? 5 people on the committee? A nice representation across the elementary schools have been working with our regional partners at BOCES, all of whom are trying to develop a K-5 response to this. So that's been a great opportunity for us. We think we're ready to go with a piece that we will introduce to staff in May at the early release day, do some follow-up training over the summer at our Leadership Institute, and then actually start bringing it into classrooms in the fall. Executive functioning has actually always been a personal issue for me because I see people struggling even as adults with some of those executive functioning skills, the ability to plan for a project to come to completion on time, the ability to do my homework, pack my homework in the backpack, and hand it into the teacher in the morning. I have one of those at home. So there you go. We sent a couple of teachers to some BOCES training earlier last year, and it went they were wowed by what they learned, came back and said, we must do in-service work on this. I will tell you that the internal subscription to that in-service, we had to turn people away. That's how many teachers wanted to attend. And we will repeat it, but it gave birth to this conversation. Lots of my work this year with the reading teachers and meeting monthly to go over their caseloads, I heard a lot of, it's not necessarily reading, here are some things I'm worried about. And so I met with Lisa and I said, we have to drill down to this now because we have kids leaving the room to get assistance in areas when we know that the root cause of the problem is not what we're addressing in those sessions. So we'll start with 6-12, which will give K-5 a little chance to settle with some of the social emotional pieces, but we have every intention of bringing it down to elementary as we move forward. And then reviewing and updating board policies in the curriculum and instruction areas to make sure that they're current. We've had a couple of interesting conversations this year with staff and administrators where we said we really need to go back and revisit this and bring it up to modern day. Professional learning and support. Examining teacher leadership in our buildings. And we have, I personally rely a lot on teacher leaders, even if they are in informal roles right now. We do have an educational leadership model, K-12. We'd love to tweak that model, expand that model. We're looking at jumping onto the tech coaches and trying to bring some coaching in literacy and math to elementary and instructional coaching to 6-12. That is an important add-on as we look to sustain the professional development that we're doing. Every good consultant that we hire knows that their job is to work themselves out of a job. But as they leave us, as much as we love them, we hate to see them go, but we have to be able to continue their work. And the best way to do that, good school districts know that you train local people to take on that coaching role so that conversation never ends. And then we have, obviously, as Laura does with the tech people, we continue to train and support the people who step into those coaching roles. Developing a professional learning plan, the new requirement for 1920 will ask the district to identify professional learning opportunities for their administrators and their teaching assistants, along with the current role of identifying professional learning for teachers. So we look forward to that. We've already started conversations with the administrative team, and we've spent a lot of time, the three of us this year, working to provide professional learning opportunities for our teaching assistants. And then, of course, fiscal responsibility as we goal set. We try to affect personnel reductions through attrition or repositioning people. Someone might take on a slightly different role. Maximizing staffing through scheduling, especially where we have shared staff across schools, largely an issue at elementary. So looking at our schedule, so we're not having people travel during the day, which causes us to have a loss of instructional time. The 6-day schedule has benefited us in being able to assign people for days, maybe 2 days at BV, 2 days at Frank G. So it definitely has helped us in that area. Considering any long-term implications. So, in all work, but especially in schools, you have to plan out, 3 years out, 5 years out. Who do we want to be? If we dream this up, what could it look like? So that we can begin to think about materials and the right staffing in those places. So that's a consideration for us. We've done some nice dreaming, especially I think around the art and design programs. About what this could look like as we continue to upload and get ready for that. And then again, examining class sizes and course offerings to make sure that we're efficient, that we're meeting the needs of the kids, that we have the right teachers in the right places. So all of that is behind some of this. So the funding sources for curriculum, instruction, assessment, and professional development. A large part of the funding for the department comes through the title grants. So there are several grant opportunities that come to us through the federal government. Title I addresses students who are at risk. Those are the kids who are going to AIS reading, AIS math, and also social and emotional reasons as well. Kids who have attendance issues would fall under that category. So some staff member is assigned to working with the student, perhaps working extended with the family. So that grant, you can see, is being reduced. And the question marks are there because we actually don't learn our allocations until about June 30, July 1st. So it's very hard to plan from one year to the next because, as you can see on the top line, we went from 152,000 in 17-18 to 99,000 in 18-19, and that was a little bit of a oops. So we have to constantly wait and then see how we're going to apportion the activities we want to participate in. Title II is a grant whose funds are dedicated to professional development. A lot of our consultant fees come out of that title. Title III is dedicated to students who are second language learners. So all of the funding that comes to us through that goes to our ENL program, teacher PD, student materials, student experiences, etc. Title IV is a new grant made available this year. Districts received a very small amount of money this year. We're not quite sure what that will look like or how, if it's apply for it or if it's just given to you. And it's basically used to extend learning. So it can be used for, we actually bought a software package through it that allows kids to adjust. It self-adjusts for kids' ability level. But you can use it for tech. You can use it for building your health program. Interesting targets. And then extended learning, whether it's an enrichment piece, which is how we viewed the purchase of Dreambox this year. And then the last piece there is New York State textbook funding, which is per pupil and depends on enrollment, so you can see a very slight fluctuation in monies there. And then the bottom lines are district funding that comes out of our budget. There's no increase there. I think we've actually done a pretty good job. Have I, Enrique, staying in line?
Oh, wow. I wasn't forced
and trying to tighten that up. And really just, Jane, who's my administrative assistant, and I have worked very hard with Enrique's staff to figure out the BOCES bills and make sure that everything is apportioned appropriately and charged to the appropriate codes. So I think every year we seem to get a little tighter on that and therefore getting more for our kids out of those monies.
Now we need to teach children.
Next slide. And again, I apologize that that's so tiny, but it's really a list of some of the things that we've done with those different grants. Carol?
Question. I know that children in our district that are in private schools are also entitled to textbooks that we fund. Are those numbers in the numbers on the slide
No.
as well? Or are those just our internal kids? Just-
There's another account code called Private and Parochial Textbooks.
Okay.
We fund it through them.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting account, to say the least.
We do, however, with students, Hendrick Hudson students that are in other schools, money is a portion. So for argument's sake, we have some students who are down at St. Augustine's. We met with the principal earlier in the year. We looked at the grant together. And students of ours that are at risk there, they get their proportional amount of money follows them wherever they go. So that absolutely happens, in addition to the textbook piece. So again, we do tremendous things with after-school work, summer work with kids, lots of material purchases, lots of professional development for the staff that delivers those programs. I think we've been pretty happy with how much we've been able to offer because of that money. The caveat is that money is not always guaranteed from one year to the next, so you do have to be cautious about what you're putting forward. Okay.
So this is just an overview of what our student enrollment has been and is at this point. We are still in the process of tabulating our income in kindergarten, so that's going to affect what our total is for 2019. We've declined slightly, but stayed sort of steady. And this does include students enrolled in all 5 schools, private schools, and parochial schools, and at district schools as of October 1st of each year. So if we look at our elementary enrollment, you will see the top, there's some blanks under K for 1920, because like I said, we're still looking for what those numbers are going to be a final. This was as of yesterday, these are the numbers.
And as you guys know, we have, we have a targeted enrollment period. We have students moving into the district late into the summer. Some families come and register their kids after they see the bus drive by a couple times, and we've had some real tough decisions to make around staffing with regards to kindergarten enrollment, because we have pockets of kids that come in as late as October and November.
So it looks like there's, over the past 8 or 9 years, a 10% decrease in enrollment. Do we know why that's happening? Is it that people are moving in, the kids go to school and they don't move out?
Yeah,
Or is it?
Yeah, so a number of years ago, in 2016, we had a demographic study, and the demographic study suggested that we're going to be experiencing decreasing enrollment like many other suburban Westchester districts, with the exception of, I think, Ossining is really the only one growing. And it's what the demographer calls aging in place. Kids graduate, it's affordable to stay here, and so the homes aren't flipping to new families. That's for a number of reasons. One is we are the most affordable, from a school tax standpoint, the most affordable suburban Westchester district. So there is not necessarily the incentive for folks to move out as soon as their kid graduates. If you talk to my colleague or Enrique's colleague in Pleasantville or Chappaqua or other down county districts, those homes usually go for sale in the summer going into 12th grade for their youngest. And if they flip and sell their house quickly, they're looking for an apartment to stay in for the rest of the year so they can graduate, or some special dispensation from the school district to finish, even though they may not be a resident. So it's usually about affordability, and we're very affordable. Now, the housing forecast in the last 26 months has been the hottest it's been in this district in 10 years. So we may see an uptick, but we have no way to forecast that. We had talked about a demographic study over the last couple of years with all of the unknowns and variables around Indian Point. To plan on bad data gives you bad plans. So.
Isn't there also an overall decrease in birth rates? There was like a little uptick and then a downswell. And I saw something the other day also that New York State has the highest number of mass exits. Yes, people leaving.
Seniors, yep.
Is Is it seniors?
No, it's
No,
not.
I think
First
it's-
grade?
I think it's
Seniors
primarily
and
young.
Both of them,
Yeah.
yes.
Right.
tax issues now.
Right.
Well, a lot of people are going to Florida, and now they're actually
yeah.
tracing a lot of people to make sure they're actually doing that. This is just residency. They're checking on residency,
Right.
correct? Yeah.
And so this is an overview of our elementary staffing as of March 11th, which was 2 days ago. And oddly enough, on that date, we hit 1,000 students. Sometimes it goes down by 1 or 2, it goes up by 1 or 2, but that day we hit 1,000. So you can see the breakdown of how we have teachers assigned and all the related services as well, including music teachers, E&L, related services, E&L. When we go to middle school, this gives us sort of a middle ground where we are right now, as we have our students incoming and outgoing. Unless anybody moves into the district, that those numbers would change a little bit.
The slide previous, I caught Frank G. and BV have the same amount of reading teachers. Is that based on test scores and need?
Yes.
Or is it?
Yes, so the reading teachers are one of a group of people hired that are K-12 employees, and they follow the need of the students. So if next year, for argument's sake, Blue Mountain had more children than they could currently service with their reading staff, then we would look at which of the elementaries could possibly move up. Maybe we're sending a lot of 5th grade students. So maybe one of the reading teachers at Frank G would go over, or BB. They understand that they're following the numbers, so.
Now that wasn't all of that easy of a task.
No.
Because when we committed to multiple measures and multiple diagnostics of literacy skills and abilities, Margaret would quarterly, 3 times a year, look at that data with the reading teachers and say, you know, based on that diagnostic and information, real-time information within a week or 2 from the assessment to the analysis, we had to move some people. And I remember a number of conversations saying, well, wait a minute, I teach at this school. Yeah, but the need is somewhere else. So that started to create the culture of much like PPS, where they respond to the need, that they become part of the intervention team as opposed to just a direct instruction, or every elementary school gets 2 reading teachers regardless of need.
Well, I think that would be the question, because you initially look and FGL has so many more students than BV, and yet they both have the same number of reading teachers. And I think to a lot of people looking at these numbers, they may not understand, what causes the amount to be equal.
And actually, that's going to be a problem in New York State, because the state controller now is auditing schools and saying, and changing the way we're going to account by buildings more than is required. We usually do it by building. If you look at our account codes, I would say 90% are for buildings, but not other districts. And then when the state auditors audit you and see something like that without understanding that PV needs more reading because it's more Hispanic population, they would say, oh, no, cut a teacher there, a reading teacher there, and put it in French. They would tell you.
Disproportionate staffing,
Yeah.
looking at a spreadsheet.
Yes,
But
that is a
I
very
think that's
common.
why, without an explanation, I would think that somebody just looking at that would have a concern.
Yep,
Well, and I would take it to the other extreme, Barbara, that it's okay if I'm a reading teacher that my kids have tested out of the intervention. Now I can go give more service to more students before they have to qualify. This is not a work your way out of a job, it's try to do some preventative maintenance, not just working with students after we have an identified need.
I also look at these numbers, and it looks like the average is about 20 kids to a teacher.
19.
that
Well,
depends though.
1,000 to 50, right? So about 20 kids to a teacher, but then...
Not in every school.
Not in every school, right? So it looks like VB is a little lower than that, and Furnace Woods, but FGL seems to have the bulk of, you know, a lot more kids to teach.
It actually depends on the grade. So if you
Okay.
looked at the schools, and was that the slide before, or was that the one we use internally? You can see that in in Frank G and in BV, there are some grades that balloon, so to speak, so they do have higher numbers. So I can tell you there's probably a grade or two at BV where they have more kids. They had the biggest kindergartens this year.
Yes.
Remember, we talked about splitting or not, and we chose not to. So they had a very large kindergarten compared to Furnace Woods that had a very small kindergarten. So there's always that struggle between how do you balance that? How do you make it, you know, fair isn't always equal? How do you look at the three schools and then from grade to grade make that happen?
It also depends on where the ICT classes go to.
Absolutely.
That's the other thing.
So do we move teachers between schools if there is a...
Yeah, if we needed to. So if one school was going to cut a section and there was no place for that teacher to go, but there was an opening, an increase at BB, then somebody would be moving over there.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes they move because they want to experience a different grade level, but again, you go where the need is. Our ENL teachers work the same way. They go where the need is. I'm going to move some people next year because the need is shifted to a different building. And there also, Barbara, that's a very deceiving number because ENL teachers work with a minute requirement for each proficiency level. So you could look at an ENL teacher and say, but she only has 10 kids. Those 10 kids are really 20 kids
Right.
because there are two different requirements they have to meet for each student. So you do have to understand what's behind the numbers, otherwise you can look at it and say, well, you know, we're overstaffed.
No, I definitely understand.
Yeah, I know you do.
I definitely, from teaching, I know why this occurs, but I know I'm always asked by a lot of people,
Right.
you know, why does, you know, Frank G not have, you know, the same amount, why do they have the same amount as BV?
Yep.
And they have a much larger population at Frank G, you know, and sometimes when you just put numbers and you don't have the explanation, it's like you said, you know, you look at the number of students and Frank G is so much bigger, but they actually have more teachers as a result. You look at the number of teachers at Furnace Woods or at BV, and overall, you know, there are more teachers at Frank G. But just looking at it, it looks completely out of balance.
Well, the ratio is higher
Absolutely.
at that school, so it seems like
Yeah.
there's more burden on the teacher.
But not in every
based on-
grade, that's
Right.
the whole thing.
Not based on the diagnostic
Right.
assessment.
Right.
That's,
Right.
you know, it's not a ratio, it's the evaluation of each student.
Yes, I can assure you that 3 times a year,
And that's what I was
I
just
sit
gonna
with
say.
the building
Right.
principals and we look at their benchmark results, and I think we're in the swing of things with one another now, so we kind of have a good picture. We understand, we have a well-developed sense of the criteria that creates the profile for a kid who needs help. And that's important, otherwise a lot of kids are pushed to it that may not necessarily need it. So we were very clear about that. We're in our 4th year now of using those profiles, and we tweak them as we need to. So, you know, again, that's not in concrete either. I create a profile, but then, and I can see who the cut is of students, but I always sit down with the principal and say, and who's not here that is keeping you up at night? And let's talk about what that means. So kids get added, kids get accessed in the middle of the year. It's benchmark time, we just finished. So lots of my reading teachers are celebrating kids who don't need reading anymore. You know, I got rid of 3 kids, yay for me. You know, that's exciting news for everybody. So again, it's sometimes hard because the numbers really don't tell the whole story. Yeah.
And that's the goal of a good reading program,
Yeah.
is actually to have students test out of it, you know? That's your biggest accomplishment.
And avoid any kind of classification, you know, if you're being proactive at those younger ages, you're gonna find that we have a lower classification rate.
Yeah.
And just real quick, Laura, if you could go back one slide. This staffing pattern with regards to elementary is a function of who lives where and when. This is a function of kids in neighborhoods. So we have had years where one school in kindergarten had 13 kids in the classroom and another had 23 because of the enrollment in that school at that particular time. So you'll see trends that appear to be high in some schools or low in others, and that's how many kids live there at a particular time.
VV was an anomaly this year. Usually VV, the classes are very small, so that's, because we've kept the caps very low purposely, so K1 and 2, we could really remediate all of the problems before, they become bigger and bigger and bigger and we have the grades.
Well, and we had an issue. I mean, part of the frustration of New York State school district budgeting process, not us, but the state demand, is we're forecasting staffing in March. The public will hopefully approve it in May. And in October, this could be completely different. And we had a situation
Oh my goodness.
a year or two ago. We had just enough kids move into a particular neighborhood elementary school in particular grade levels that created a $400,000 increase in our budget for staff. That was not known in March.
Right.
So you roll the dice a little bit in forecasting, either hope they don't come, so our numbers are right, or forecast that they do and then hope they come. Otherwise, we've over budgeted. Middle school?
It's dropping so much in 2021 with this budget.
And if anybody's back into the staff and connected to that. So right now, this year, we told 520 students in the building with 30 classroom teachers, and then in addition to all the other related services. High school.
It's really predicted to drop off.
Yes.
all the grades.
Wow.
We'll be able to save some money.
But those sort of
Always the
trends in the
pragmatist.
those sort of trends in the high school are situations we are looking
We will
at that,
find ways
that
to
may
spend
have
it, I'm
may have
sure.
been untouchable. You heard Lisa at her presentation last time. We have 5 counselors at the high school. We have a model at the high school that deals with incoming 9th graders differently, and then they go on to a different counselor, 10 through 12. We are going to have to look at that huge gap in enrollment and look at it around our mandated courses we have to offer, our non-mandated courses, and our related services.
Of course, this is just a projection, so again, if we have different families moving into the
Right.
area, that might change in a year.
So this is always big news every year. Some of our, our longstanding teachers have chosen to retire. So we have these confirmed retirements: technology at the middle school, high school art teacher. We have 2 elementary school teachers, speech and language teachers retiring, high school social studies teacher, high school special education teacher, our 6th grade English teacher, and middle school science teacher.
Middle school special.
Middle school special ed.
There's an additional one?
No, that one was a while ago.
No, but it's not there.
It's not there, no.
Oh,
The 2 that left off.
hold on.
And then with all of that, at this point, this is where we're anticipating adding anybody new to this, and that would be in the AIS
So
math and
this is, right, this is on the general education side of things. I think Lisa presented some of her needs when she did her budget a few weeks back. So in the general ed side, new staffing is, we hope for a 1.5 K-5 AIS math. We started the AIS math program this year with a 1.0. She is amazing and shared across 3 buildings, so she dances her way through the week. and we're hoping to give her some colleagues so that we can service more students on a day-to-day basis at each of the schools. And then a .5 K-12 ENL teacher. And again, I have a .5 part-time right now who is doing some work for us at Blue Mountain. Not sure that that's where the need will be, but the .5 will be used somewhere. So it's just a shifting rotation based on where kids are going and kids that are coming in right now. And then, of course, we also have to wait and see when the nicest slot is given in the spring. Some of our kids will exit second language services. They are still entitled to 2 years of support, although that support looks very different, as you might imagine, than day-to-day instruction. So that's what we're thinking would work for us next year. And again, as we mentioned earlier, we're looking to bring executive functioning on board, starting with the secondary level, introducing the K-5 SEL program. We are looking to expand Project Lead the Way. There are some courses. The middle school is currently doing something, and there are other opportunities, so we'll talk with the Blue Mountain staff to see how that best would fit with the current staffing folks that they have, and also the opportunities in terms of the schedule for our kids at middle school. And then there is a program at K-5 that we're kind of keeping an eye on. We have some neighbors in the region that are exploring that, and they're giving us some feedback. I have gone with Blair to do some visits to schools that are already using the program. And then the conversation at 612 around the expansion of the digital arts pathway. Paul Giacchini and Logan Krause have started a really nice experience at the middle school and are working with the high school teachers to push that work up and create a continuation for the kids that are so excited about what's happening in their middle school experience. So, and it's part of the new standards. So.
Questions, comments? I know we sort of did them as we went along.
Have there been any discussions about bringing the executive functioning work down to the elementary
We
and
have
middle?
every intention of doing that, but because we're introducing them this in 1920 to the SEL piece, we thought we might end up needing to wait till the next year. But we have every intention of getting them as early as we can
Yeah,
to
because
build
that's how
those
it's
habits.
going to work the best.
Absolutely.
Right. Thank you.
Do we have an idea as to with these confirmed retirements about replacing or not? Or not
We're
yet?
discussing that right now with the admins and looking at, again, you can see the shifting enrollment from one grade to the next. So, how does that impact 6th grade to 7th grade, 4th grade to 5th grade? So right now, we're talking with everybody at each building to think about what does this look like as the kids move.
And we have to evaluate that against what you saw, some of the class size trends. So depending on where the needs are, I know, special ed is always very difficult to forecast because Lisa and her team are in annual review season, and IEPs change and needs change and programs change. So we have advertised for the jobs on an anticipated basis, so we can create a candidate pool and at least start building a bench of potential candidates. And once we have more concrete information, we'll know whether we need to replace people full-time, part-time, whether there are other interested staff within the district. So when we identify these vacancies, someone from the high school may want to, try it at the middle school. They meet with Lisa or whoever, if it's a special ed job, and they have an interview process to see if it's a good fit. So that process is begun and wraps up, I think, no sooner than April 15th.